Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome again to another program or lesson in the EJC online platform. My name is Patrick Thompson. I'm a teacher of mathematics. This afternoon, we'll be looking at calculating parameter using standard units. I hope and trust that as we go through today, that we will be able to benefit from the lesson. So when we talk about standard units, we are talking about standard units that has to do with an agreeable standard wherever it is. Wherever you are, that unit will remain the same. So I just want to go through a few of the objectives that we'll be looking at. We'll be looking at solving real-world and mathematical problems involving parameters of polygons, including finding the parameter given in terms of sides, lengths, finding an unknown side length, and exhibiting rectangles with same parameter and different areas of width. Now, I want you to know before we can proceed into even finding the parameter of anything, we would have to understand shape identification. And so my lesson this afternoon will be centered around, when I was a little boy, I used to go to church. And there was a song that I enjoyed doing while I was at church as a little boy. And it had to do with the city of Jericho. So as I go forward, I'll just remind you that I'm still in studio. That's why I'm without my mask. I'm still making sure that I sanitize. So remember, as you go outside, as you interact, make sure that you carry your mask with you and make sure that you continue to sanitize. I know there might be a little lowering off to the consciousness that relates to COVID and stuff like that, but we still have to be careful and concerned. So I'm going to leave here and I'm going to go towards the city of Jericho. Now, perimeter is a concept that we are going to learn about this afternoon. That this song, as a child, when I was studying it at church and singing, I didn't know that this song captured the whole essence of perimeter. For those persons who know me, they know that I'm not the best of singers, but I'm going to do my best. I don't know if it will be #1 on YouTube, but I am going to do my song. So when I was a child and I was at church, the people of Jericho, they were following the Word of God. And so my starting point is at the Word of God, the Bible. And it goes something like this. Around the walls of Jericho, around the walls of Jericho, around the walls of Jericho, the army went. 7 times without a shout, 7 times without a shout, 7 times without a shout, the army went. When the people made a shout, when the people made a shout, when the people made a, the walls came down. Now, this in essence represents what we are going to be looking at as it relates to perimeter. We are going to be at a starting point. So on my demonstration table, which would represent the walls of Jericho, perimeter has to do as it relates to finding the distance around the area of a particular shape or figure. So I can move to my board to explain a little more for you. So this is Jericho City. This is Jericho City. And we had started here. I just put this so you can see. Now the items on the table would represent the people of Jericho City. So I'm going to insert that today. So the traveling that I was doing, I was going all the way around the walls of Jericho. All the way on the outside. All the way. Now I just used a different color. But if I were to be precise, I would be walking specifically on the blue lines coming all the way around the city of Jericho. In essence, perimeter has to do with the total distance around a closed shape. As we mentioned in our objectives, we mentioned about polygons, and we will look a little deeper and further into that. A distance around a closed shape. Now, when we talk about standard measure, for those of you would have been in the classroom, you would be familiar with this. And this, in essence, is a meter rule. This, in essence, is a meter rule. For those who are familiar with a certain profession, this is a tape, a measuring tape, and this is also a different type of measuring tape. Now, can you think of professions or professionals that use this? Now, from this measuring tape, I can also still get 1 meter. So this is my meter rule. You can think of persons who use this. Obviously, teachers use their meter rule. You can think of professionals who use this tape measure. Could you help me to identify some of them? I can think of a mason, a carpenter, and so I can have it right here, but from my tape measure, I can get a meter. I can get a meter from my tape measure, and I can also use this one to show you. Can you think of some professionals, ladies? Your mommy will know this when you go to the dressmaker, or daddy will tell you when they go to the tailor. It's a little bit longer. I can also get the same meter rule right here. Now I can get a meter. This is a standard measure. This is a standard measure. Wherever I go, this meter will continuously be 1 meter. So if I go to the USA, if I go to China, it will still remain 1 meter. Now, my opening has to do with marching around Jericho walls. Now, we talk about non-standard measures. We're talking about like using our fingers, our feet. If I were walking with LeBron James or Shaquille O'Neal, those tall basketball players, their shoe sizes will be much bigger than mine. And so if I were to measure with my feet on the ground, I would have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. At least 9 would get me from one end here to the other end of Jericho City. I can agree, and I can say to you that if Shaq or LeBron James would be here and they were stepping towards there, I am sure they are going to get less feet measure because they have a larger foot size. And so when we talk about non-standard measure, we are talking about measures that doesn't necessarily confirm and equal in essence, because we are all men and we all have feet, but our feet size not the same. If we use our meter rule and to measure the distance from here, we would get 1 meter right here, come across, and it's almost 2 meters and a little piece. It will not change. If I get 1 meter from my tape, come across, I get my measurement, you can see it right here, right there, 1 meter, the measurement continues the same, 2 and a little piece. I can use my tape measure, look for my meter mark, finding it right here, I have it right here, 1 meter right here, hold it, but it's across, I still get the same 2 and a little piece. So this is what we call a standard measure. It doesn't change, and it has to do with distance. Now, we have standard measure that we use for distance. We have standard measure that we use for mass. We have standard measure that we have to do with liquid measure. Like when you go to buy petrol at the gas station, wherever you go, it might be a different cost in terms of, but it's the same volume. You get 1 liter here, you still get 1 liter. The cost might vary, but 1 liter at this particular gas station is going to be the same as another liter at the gas station. So that's what we call standard measure. Now, when we talk about Jericho City, or we discovered that when the people were marching, they weren't marching inside Jericho City. So I want you to understand that perimeter is concerned with the distance on the borders or on the outskirt. So I want to emphasize that again. Perimeter has to do with the borders, outside of. Now, we say in mathematics that when you're working with polygons, polygons are 2-dimensional. We can have over here where we have this side could be referred to as the length, and this side could be referred to as the width. So we say it's a two-dimensional diagram. Now, perimeter has to do with just one type of movement. It's one-dimensional. I go again. When I was doing around the walls, I'm just doing one thing. Around the walls of Jericho, around the walls of Jericho, around the walls of Jericho, the army went. Right from where I started at the Word of God, started at the Bible, I go all the way. It's very important that you understand that we started at point B in this time, B for Bible. We went all the way around. We covered our grounds. So when we talk about perimeter, we're talking about the total distance around a closed shape. We're covering all our tracks. We're not leaving any space. So we did not start in Jericho City, and then we walk halfway, and then we stop. We made our entire movements and marching all the way around Jericho City. Now, it's very important that you understand that we never went inside of Jericho City. Very, very important. Perimeter has no concern with what is happening inside of Jericho City. Perimeter is concerned with what is happening outside the borders of Jericho City. So we can make it even more interesting right now. We can give Jericho's, in this case, it would have a rectangular shape. So we could give some measurements to it. So let's say it being a city, right here was 1 kilometer, and this side was 2 kilometers. We could definitely see that this side is similar to over here. The same look, it's 1 kilometer right here, and this side is similar to down here, equal, it gets 2 kilometers. So if I were in Israel's army, and I started here, in finding the perimeter, all I would have to do, the perimeter would give me side plus side plus side plus side. And I could easily ask, why am I writing down 4 sides? Because I'm dealing with a 4-sided shape. The city of Jericho in this instance is set like a rectangle. It has a rectangular shape. So I have side 1, which would have been 1 kilometer. The other side would be 2 kilometers, plus another 1 kilometer, plus another 2 kilometers. And in so doing, all I would do, with my equal sign, I would get the perimeter of Jericho City. 1 plus 2, that's going to give me 3, and plus another 1 is going to give me 4, and plus 2 is going to give me 6 kilometers. So as a soldier in Jericho march, for that particular circling of the city, I would walk 6 kilometers. I can show you my starting point. I could start my starting point, starting from it would be the larger side, this side, going around Jericho wall. This would represent the larger side on the board. I would get my 2 kilometers here, plus another 1 kilometer here. That would give me 3, plus another 2 kilometers right here, plus another 1 kilometer right here. So my going around Jericho would give me 6 kilometers in totality. And I'm just in this case, as you go older and you go into upper and high school, you would see where I'm using my meter rule to represent a kilometer. So we will get into that. So basically, as I've said to you, perimeter is not concerned with what is happening inside of Jericho as you look at the table right here. Perimeter has to do with what is happening on the outskirt, the border. So I want you to bear that in mind. Very, very important. Perimeter is not concerned with what is happening inside of Jericho city. It is concerned with what is happening at the borders. And so I can give measurements to it. It doesn't have to be, it's a very large city. Kingston is in the Caribbean, in Jamaica. It's a small city. There are large cities in the world, like New York City. We pray for those who are over there dealing with the corona. We have Mexico City also, very large city. We have Tokyo. We have Sydney in Australia. We have London. All these places are larger cities than Kingston. So I want you to bear in mind, as I come across, that Jericho city being a rectangle, it is a four-sided city. We have to cover all. Now we said standard units are units of measure that are typically used within each measuring system, like the ones we already mentioned. Because standard units of measure are what we normally use. Most measuring tools use these units. For example, as I showed you, let me just go and get this. Our meter rule, we can have that. We use that in terms of our measurement. As you see, even in sports with Usain Bolt running, he did his world record 100 meters, so it's 100 of these lined out. Usain Bolt covered that distance in 9.58 seconds for the world record run in athletics there. And so we can say scales depending on what we want to achieve. Scales, I can go across here and show you what. Dealing with mass, we can look at our justice scale. People would say weights, how much pounds you weigh, and stuff like that. So there are different standards of measure that we use. Now, in discovering perimeter, we look at our four-sided shape. In this side, it's a quadrilateral. The y and the x would represent the one sides of the rectangle. The y side in this case would be the smaller part of Jericho City that we just demonstrated, and the x would be the larger side. Now, this rectangle represents what we would call a polygon. We said it is two-sided. So our perimeter of our rectangle has nothing to do with the inside. If we're finding the perimeter, you can look at my pencil that I have right here, and I'm coming all the way around. Coming all the way online. I'm not skipping, no gap. Making sure that I stay on it, and I go all the way around. Has to do with the outside. Has to do with the outside there. So I want you to see that. Okay? I want you to see that it has to do with that, going all the way around. All the way around, from start to finish. We're not leaving out anything. So I want you to make sure that you get that. And then just for clarification, I want you to see that polygons are two-dimensional shapes. They are made of straight lines, very, very important. Made of straight lines, and the shape is closed. And let me go over so you can see right here. Just want to go back to the board so you can see right here where it says that we have straight lines. There are no gaps within the lines. Absolutely no gaps within the line. That's very important. And we have to make sure straight lines. I was just making the circle here just to show you the outside area. But Jericho City is on a straight rectangular base, and the lines are straight. So it's very important that you understand that when you're measuring your perimeter, we can use our meter, and we can put our meter down, and we take the measurement off. In this case, we would have already calculated it to be 1 kilometer or 2 kilometers, so we define that. So I just want you to get that. That is very important that you get it that way. So it has to be a closed shape. So I just wanted to go across to share that with you. Now, in arriving at perimeter, we have to get the total distance around a closed shape. Now, we have quadrilaterals, which are four-sided shapes. Can anybody tell me another type of polygon or polygons that doesn't have to have four shapes? What about polygons that have three sides and they are closed shape? What am I talking about? See right here? On my screen, I have side plus side plus side. That would be the first one. The second one said side plus side plus side. So that would give me 3 sides. Let me put it here, give you another slide. So this would represent Jericho City being on a 4-sided base, a rectangular base. Now, right across from it, I'm sure there's a famous building that you know in the United States that's referred to as the Pentagon. Now, the Pentagon, penta, meaning that it is designed to be, it has 5 sides to it, so it's pentagonal in shape. So if Jericho City was shaped like a pentagon, instead of measuring 4-sided, it would have a different design than the table that we have inside. We would have to ensure that we measure not just 4 sides that we had over here. We wouldn't measure right. We would have to make sure that we measure all 5 sides coming all the way around. All the way around. Let me just draw this on the board for you so you can see this. If Jericho City, let me just do some erasing right here. Very important that you pay attention to this to make the comparison. Jericho City, I'm putting it on a 5-sided plane. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm doing what I was told. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Over here, Jericho was a city with 4 sides. And so I would measure. I'm saying that if Jericho was a city with 5 sides, I would have to make sure in finding the perimeter, I would have to calculate all the sides right here. It's very important that you pay attention to it. And the figure has to be close. So in this case, in letting you see that if Jericho was a city with 5 sides, we would measure all 5 sides. We could also look at it if it was triangular in shape, looking at our presentation. If it was our figure that is down here, or a triangle shape that is down here. If Jericho was a city with 3 sides, we would not have any need to go and measure 4 sides. We would focus right here. Now, the main important thing that I want you to get, as I said, that perimeter is not concerned with what is happening inside of Jericho. As the song says, around the walls of Jericho, around the walls of Jericho. So perimeter has to do with the total distance. And as you go around, you take the measure. Now, in using standard units, in this case, I was using my meter rule, and on the board, I was using kilometers, and those are standard measure. Now, in class, if I could step across right here, let's say I wanted to find the perimeter of my Bible, which would be representing of your classroom notebook. I could use any one of these. Because they are standard measure. And I could go right here. In this case, I'll be using the unit centimeters right here. So I would get my measurement. So when I'm using the ruler, when I'm using the tape measure that the dressmaker or tailor uses, I am going to still get the same distance. Why? I'm still going to get the same distance when I measure it. And each gave me at least 22 centimeters. Very interesting. I don't know if it's because the Word of God is standard wherever it is also, but standard units wherever they are. If I take the meter rule from here and I put it over here, it is still 1 meter. If a child was with me in the classroom today, and that child was measuring using his or her feet, and they put their feet together, unlike Shaquille O'Neal or LeBron James, who would use less, a little child in the classroom would not get as much, they get much more than I do, because I would have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, close to 9. Now a little child, and we could look at it even a toddler, that child would get much more steps to go across. You could say a little child who's in grade 1, and we're talking about averages here, would get much more. So it's very important that we understand that in finding the parameter using standard measure, we have to pay attention to shape identification, which is very important. Understanding that this shape has 4 sides. All 4 sides must be taken into consideration. As we talk about the pentagon, it's a 5-sided building. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All the 5 sides will have to be taken into consideration. And as we saw on our PowerPoint, if we had a building which was triangular in nature, making sure I try to make the lines as straight as possible. 1, 2, 3. So Jericho City having 4 sides, I would measure all 4 sides. If Jericho City had 5 sides, I would measure 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 sides. And wherever I start, if I start right here, if this is my starting point, then perimeter would require me to go all the way around back to my starting point, and I cannot miss. So if it were triangular in nature, if Jericho City was triangular in nature, then I would have to go 1, 2, 3. So it's very important that we pay attention to this. Now, as I said earlier, sometimes people get confused or get caught up in an area that is very familiar and relative to perimeter, which has to do with areas. Finding the area of a particular place versus finding the perimeter of a particular place. But we can easily remember this if we remember that little Bible song that I did as a little boy. Around the walls of Jericho. It has nothing to do with what is in Jericho. It is interested with what is around the walls of Jericho. So if I were a soldier in the Israelite army, I would be marching around the walls on the outskirts. I wouldn't be interested in what's on the inside. So it's very important that we pay attention to this, that perimeter has to do with the measurement. And when we say it's a one-dimensional measurement, notice when I'm going around the walls of Jericho, it is one-dimensional. I am going around as a soldier, one-dimensional. One-dimensional, goes all the way around. Not one direction. I could have taken marching around Jericho. I have to demonstrate this also, that I could also go around Jericho from this angle. So if I walked this way around Jericho, it's still not going to change the measurement. Still not going to change. So whether I decide to go in that direction or whether I decided to go in that direction, it's important. But I want you to understand that I did not walk this way and then I turned back. No, I just continue in one direction. At my starting point, in this case, I'm using the Word of God. I go all the way around, so whichever direction. So it's very important that you bear that in mind. And remember, there should not be any gaps in your measurement. Right here is 1 kilometer. So as a soldier, I'll have to march all the way down to this 1 kilometer mark. And then I start my new march right here all the way around. And I'm adding. So my 1 kilometer march plus my 2 kilometers march, that would be 3 kilometers. And if I put my other side, which is similar to over here, it's going to give me 1. It's another that's going to give me 4, and I go all the way around. And it would have been completed in my finding the perimeter of Jericho. So it's very important that you bear this in mind. Now sometimes, going back to my PowerPoint, sometimes we can have a situation, what is called, we have shapes within shapes. So you could be asked to find the perimeter of a particular shape. Now, if you are someone who is in high school or even primary school, this is a game that girls play. Can anyone identify what type of court is this? Ah, you have guessed it right. It's a netball court. So if you can see right there, it's a netball court. If I was asked to find the perimeter of the netball court, just like Jericho City, where would I be interested in? Exactly. I would be interested on the outside borders right here that I'm moving. The outside borders. I don't want us to get caught up with the different thirds right here. Inside the netball court right here, we are not concerned. That is the area where the players would be running up and down, and they will be passing their ball, and they will be making sure that they don't step and do all sorts of stuff. But I'm saying, for perimeter purposes, wherever we start on our netball court, right on the outside, we're going to make a complete march all the way around like Jericho City, and that would give us the perimeter. So sometimes in class, when students are given perimeter of shapes, they can get a situation where a diagram is given and they are also sometimes led to believe that they should go on the inside. But I think that we can remember that song from the Bible. As I said, as a little child, I remember it. And when I learned perimeter, it logged into my mind. Around the walls of Jericho, around the walls of Jericho. And that stuck with me, where I realized and recognized that perimeter has to do with the outside. It has nothing to do with the inside measurement. It has to do with the borders. You know, the borders of something. It could be the borders of your laptop, the borders of your... Even, have you ever played the game hide and seek? I know it's COVID time and we are not necessarily interacting, but when I was a child, we were fond of playing hide and seek, and our parents would say to us, do not go outside of the yard. And so our perimeter or boundary for where we played hide and seek would be at the corners, right around. You know, in this case, right around. We wouldn't necessarily we couldn't go over to the neighbors. It's right around the house we would be. So the house would be our marker. And that is for those persons who live in houses where they can actually circle the house like that. I know some persons might be in apartments. So I'm not in any way suggesting that everybody could have done that. It could be in the confines of your home, but I'll give you that from another perspective in another session. So that is very, very important that you understand in finding the perimeter of a shape that we are not referring to anywhere on the inside. We're referring to somewhere on the outside. I can't overemphasize this as I come across to the board. It's very important that as I write the word, that perimeter, if we're talking about Jericho City, I can write it in here so you can get it. It's on the outside. The perimeter has to do with the outside. Perimeter has to do with the outside. Another word for the outside, we could write border. Very, very important. And as we said, the borders, don't be like me. The borders should be straight lines coming all the way across. There should be no gaps in them, so that when you put your meter, when you put your ruler, not necessarily you'll have a smaller ruler than this. When you put it, you get the correct measurement from right here going all the way across. There should not be any gaps in the line. Let me just put this like that. That's not going to give us accurate measurement. There should be no gaps in the line. All the gaps should be closed. So that's very, very important that we bear this in mind. There should not be any gaps, and we measure from one side to the other side. We find our measurement, we log it. In this case, for reference, as we said, we can change it. Let's give Jericho City a different dimension. So let's say this was 3 kilometers, and this was 2 kilometers, and this was 3 kilometers, and this was 2 kilometers. You would have to be a very fit soldier to march around Jericho. So we could give it different dimensions. In this case, we would have made Jericho City 3 kilometers. So in marching from right here to this side, the length of this side of Jericho City would be 3 kilometers. Starting from Bible, we're going to go this side coming down, we would have 2 kilometers. From this side going across, we would have 3 kilometers, so we would cover a distance of 5 kilometers. Then we would add another 2 kilometers. That would give us 7 kilometers. And then coming across again for 3 kilometers, because we have to go back to our starting point to make our total distance around the shape. No area, I cannot overemphasize as I put right here. The measurement that I have, right here, my starting point, I cannot leave out any area as I travel around the walls of Jericho. I cannot miss. I have to make sure that I cover every area. And in so doing, I would making sure that I'm taking the markers. Has anyone ever seen those road repair trucks that are doing the mileage on the highway, and there's someone with a little wheel, and on that wheel they're pushing something along that's also using a measurement? So as you travel on the roadways, you're seeing the difference between the mile post or the kilometer post. They actually are measuring the distance going all the way across. So if they were to give you the dimension in 4 directions, they would give you the accurate perimeter of a particular place. Like Jericho City, we could also find the perimeter of Kingston City, because there are persons who are living in cities today. So it's not only Jericho City that we can find the perimeter of. I wonder if anyone would want to take on that task of finding out what is the perimeter for Kingston City, the 4 directions. We could use our cardinal points in this case. We could use our cardinal points. We could use our cardinal points, and we could find out what's the perimeter of Kingston. That's very, very interesting. You could also do it for your school or perhaps your church. Well, church has been allowed to open back now. School is closed, so you might not be able to go to school, to your schoolyard. But you could find what's the perimeter of your church. You could go and you could measure, take your steps, have an estimate. You could walk around, stuff like that. So you can do it. You could do it even in your home, your backyard. There are different places and space. But let me not use the word space. There are different places that you can walk around the borders and the edges. You know, so you can look at that. I'll go over to. I just want to ask you a question from my PowerPoint slide. I'm looking at the netball court, and I want to give you a question, just a quick question to see if you would be able to remember right here. It says, which measurement below would be the nearest estimate of the netball court? I just showed you a netball court. I wonder if anyone would want to take that on. Let me get my meter rule. What would be the estimate? Anybody wants to try? Someone got it right. It would be 30 meters. White wouldn't be 30 centimeters. That would be a very little minute netball court. I don't think one person could hold on that court if it was 30 centimeters. If it was 30 kilometers. Now, I used as an example right there, and it was a genuine example. A city could be 1 kilometer by what's a perfect square right there. We could have that. But if it is kilometers, it would be a very large netball court. So we know that that is out of the way. And obviously, this being a meter rule, if you have watched the game of netball, then you would know that a netball court wouldn't be this small. So in this case, we could have an answer here that would be 30 meters. And this is making sure that we are using the concept of measurement, using standard units, understanding what a meter looks like, having our understanding of watching a game of netball and applying this. Now, I could ask you if I had a project to do or to give to the class. What is the total distance around Jamaica? Well, we know I can carry across and show you if I can get this across on the screen for you. Just like Jericho City, I put Jamaica on a grid right there. I hope you'll be able to identify the parishes. If you're Jamaican, so I'm right here. I'm inside Kingston and St. Andrew. If I'm moving towards the east, would you like to guess this parish for me? I could tell you this parish for those persons who would have done this in preparatory school. This is the parish of Paul Bogle. Yes, there's a rebellion there. Capital town, Morant Bay. Yes, coming across all the way north. Some persons have said that this part of Jamaica this parish is Jamaica's best kept secret. And notice now, even though I'm jumping from the inside, if I was doing the perimeter, I would have to go on the lines of Jamaica right here. I'm making sure I'm getting carried away being in Jamaica with such a beautiful place. Notice my little red dot going all the way around. So Paul Bogle would have been in St. Thomas, yes. And I've left Paul Bogle's parish, and I'm now in a beautiful parish. It's called Jamaica's best known secret. I'm driving my little red car right here in this parish, coming all the way, yes, you guessed it right, Capital. Portland High is a school that is over there, so I've given it away by giving it the name of that school. Portland High is all the way over there, one of our sister schools, and that's a parish of Portland. And I come across from Portland. Now this parish was in the news recently. It said that it's the last place in Jamaica that had to be given the 14 days quarantine. You guessed it right, the parish of St. Mary right here. So I'm on the border right there. On the borders right there in St. Mary, capital town, Port Maria, and then I go over to a parish that is extremely quiet now. This parish has to do with tourism and with COVID and what is happening. It's extreme. Yes, you guessed that right. It's a parish of St. Anne, and it is called the Garden Parish. Yes, capital town, St. Anne's Bay. And then when I come over here, I can't forget it as I'm doing measurement and distance, and every time I talk about meters, I cannot forget this Jamaican runner that came from up, yes, that's it, the parish of Usain Bolt, right along the coast right here. And I would be in the parish of Trelawney. And now if you travel, there are only, yes, 2 cities in Jamaica. So if I'm traveling all the way from Kingston and St. Andrew, yes, you got that right. I'm in the parish of St. James with a capital being a city there also, Montego Bay, you got that right. And as I drive out of Montego Bay, I'm coming over to this parish. Not very many people in the east have come across all the way across here. You got that right. I'm in the parish of Hanover, and I'm coming all the way from Hanover, capital town in Hanover, Lucy. Yes, come all the way down here. This is the more. So over on the side where I started was the eastern side. This is the western side of Jamaica. Yes, Westmoreland. Come all the way. See my little red dot. I'm making sure I'm getting the perimeter of my country all the way. I'm in Westmoreland and the capital town, Savannah-la-Mar. Then after leaving Westmoreland, yes, can somebody tell me which parish is this? It was in the news during this time of COVID. They had so many vegetables and stuff. Yes, and they wanted market for the airport. You got that right. This is the parish of St. Elizabeth, also known as St. Bess, and the capital town, very historical, still there. It has to do Black River, there you go, St. Bess right there. And then this comes over to a parish that is very, very familiar with me. My ancestry is from here. It is a cool parish of, you got that right, Manchester. And we have our university here. NCU is in the parish of Manchester right here. And we're coming all the way right here, next door, capital town, Mandeville right here. And then we come across right here. Yes, when the first highway was built, it cut across this parish right here. You got that right, Clarendon. And capital town is Mapen. And then we come to the largest parish in Jamaica. Yes, quite a few people live in this parish and work into Kingston right there. I can give you, see I'm making the mark there, the parish of St. Catherine. Now what I did, I just did a little markings going away. I am going around and getting the perimeter of my country, Jamaica, the total distance. Now notice when I was finding, I made sure that I did not leave out any parish. Now we could easily, let me give you another demonstration right across here. Now, if you were to look at any device that I'm working with, I'm going to put this on my PowerPoint so you can see this. If there's any phone that I have, I always have this game on it. I enjoy playing the game of chess. Now, on my chessboard here, there are some units. And can anyone help me to find the perimeter? Now, when I just did Jamaica, I never used any measurement, but I could have used kilometers. As you travel from one side, we would follow the the kilometer post, or we could say the marking stones. But in this case, my chessboard, if you look at right here, you would see 8 units coming down from here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. If you know anything about a chessboard, it is a square. And so if one side gives us 8 units, let me go across here. I'm switching over to my classroom board. I'm switching over to my classroom board. I'm going to leave Jamaica City just the same as it is. Let me remove this shape right here. So let me just put this 4-sided shape for you right here. If you know anything that's very important, it's a 4-sided figure, but it's a special one. I'm drawing freehandly. Making sure, yes, there you go. So 8 units here, and it being a square, right here would be 8 units also. And this would be 8 units, and this would be 8 units. So in getting my perimeter of my chessboard, I'll just come across quickly. I'll come across quickly to my PowerPoint here for my chessboard. In finding the perimeter of my chessboard as I am not interested in the area where the pieces are being used to play. I'm interested in where the markings are right here. We would have the numbers and the letters, but we're using in this case, the letters are also representing 1 unit. So just like how you'd have 1 to 8, you have A to H would give us 8 letters, which would give us the same equivalent units right across. So we realize and recognize that our chessboard is a square area, and in such a square city, I should say, and in such, each side is going to give us the same amount of measurement. So it's very important that now the perimeter has nothing to do with what's happening on the chessboard on the inside, whether it has to do with the bishop or the knight or the king or the queen or the pawn. It is interested in what, if I'm going to be finding the perimeter of my chessboard, I'm going to be interested with what is happening on the outskirt. What is happening on the outskirts. So it's very important that we pay attention to this, that the perimeter of a polygon, a regular polygon, has to do with the total distance all the way around. I could ask you this question, and I could do this. I could ask you this question. Why would it be difficult to find the perimeter of this shape? You guessed it right. It has to be a closed shape. It has to be a closed shape. It's very important that you bear that in mind. It cannot have any gaps, because perimeter covers all the distance all the way around. No gaps. Remember earlier in the lesson, I presented that we cannot have any gaps because it would not give us a true measure. So it's very important that we pay attention to that. Now, I could easily give you, from a different perspective, I could put on the board and I could ask you a different question. There is a perimeter test that's going to be posted online based on what is presented here. So that would be readily, it's a complete test on perimeter. I could give you this also. I could give you this question. I'm doing much quicker. So this could be 5 centimeters, and I could ask you a question. If the perimeter of this shape, if the perimeter equals 18 centimeters, I could ask you, what is the length of y? I could ask you a question like that, because I would have given you a known side. But from Jamaica City, you would know that, you guessed it, perimeter has to do with the total distance around. Total distance around. So if I could find, I can go to my markings here. I would know that this side right here is 5 centimeters. The easiest part to find over here, that's 5 centimeters. And so I would have had the measurement for 10 centimeters. And if I have 18, I could easily subtract the 10 that it is already known. See? And we could do that. We get 8 centimeters. And we have 2 sides remaining. 2 sides remaining. And so I could get my 8 centimeter divided by, I could have my 8 centimeter divided by 2. And so it gives me 4 centimeter, where y right here would be 4 centimeter and another 4 centimeter over here. So as I said, there will be a specific test that has to do with centimeters. So let me do a recap as we look at what we have discussed over the past 40 minutes or so. I used my table, if I could get my shot, started out with my Bible game, my Bible song that I used to learn when I was in church. Around the walls of Jericho. I started at a point, I started at my Bible. Perimeter has nothing to do with what's on the inside. So all these gadgets, the microphone, the laptop, the markers would represent functions and people inside the city. Might be an internet cafe. I don't know if they had an internet cafe back then, but I'm at my starting point. At this point of the city, perimeter has to do with what's happening on the outside of the city, around the walls of Jericho, around the walls of Jericho, around the walls of Jericho, the army went. So they went all the way around. Then we look at what we called our standard measure. Doesn't matter the profession. If it's a teacher, as I am, if it's a teacher that is using a meter rule, or if it's a carpenter, Jesus was a carpenter, or a mason, or a tiler, they would still be able to get their 1 meter measurement if they want to find the perimeter of something that they're doing. Or to measure anything, doesn't have to be a dressmaker or tailor, using their measuring tape, working with cloth. They could use their meter rule just the same, but just in case they have this also. So it doesn't matter what device that I am using, I will have to make sure that this remains a standard measure. Now remember I said to you that a non-standard measure has to do with hands and feet. Those are non-standard measure, and it varies from person to person. Standard measures remain the same. If I take this meter rule and I go to the United States, it will still remain the same measurement. If I go to France, if I go to South Africa, if I go to China, if I go to Japan, if I go to Trinidad, it doesn't matter. The standard remains the same. So we say that this is a standard unit that is used. And so that's very, very important. So in understanding perimeter, it's a one-dimensional measure. We will do a lesson on area, which is a little more, I wouldn't say, it would be a little more interesting, let me use that term. But perimeter has to do a one-dimensional movement around a closed shape. Very important that you understand that there was no gap. I'm seeing a gap in my Jericho city right here. Could have been that I'm working, making sure that there are no gaps. No gaps, making sure the walls are properly set. There cannot be any gap in our measurement. And remember what we said, we have to do the distance all the way around. And in logging the distance, in getting the perimeter, there are different ways in getting it, but for this particular presentation, we can have it structured this way, where we have side, we could say side 1 if we want, different ways you can do. Side 1, or side A, side B, side C, side D, whichever measurement or whichever notation that you want to use, that will help you to remember. Now, different questions might have different standard measure, different units of measure, I could say. In this case, we were working with kilometers. So in finding the parameter, we go and we put each side into our addition. We add each side. Now, there are different questions as I did right here. I could give you one side in this case, and I could give you the total parameter. So there are different variations that I could give you. Now remember, as I said also, parameter has nothing to do with what's happening on the inside. It's very, very important. So it doesn't matter. Do you remember the netball court that I showed you? The netball court that I showed you had lines on the inside, shapes within shapes. If you're asked a question to find the parameter of the netball court, don't be caught up. Let me go over to the PowerPoint so you can actually see this so that you don't get caught up in this. It's very important that you see this, that you can be asked to find the parameter of the netball court, and sometimes in our working out we get caught up with the lines in the middle right here where the centers operate. Now we are saying to you, if you remember that little song, that little Bible song, Around the Walls of Jericho, then you will remember that parameter has to do with what is happening on the borders, nothing on the inside. And then sometimes now you will have to remember standard measure, because I can also recap by going across, by asking you this question where you're watching a netball court, you will have to bear in mind that what is the length of a centimeter? That is like maths in real life. Can a netball court be 30 centimeters? And then you remember what a centimeter looks like. It's more applicable when I was measuring the Bible, or I gave you the measurement to be that long side would have been 22 centimeter. Or I was working with Jericho City and you saw me putting Jericho City being 1 kilometer on the board, then you'll have to remember that, listen, a netball court couldn't be 1 kilometer. Who's going to be able to throw a ball to another player that's 1 kilometer away? So you have to look at those things when you're trying to remember. Now, we could use kilometers in application when we were going around Jamaica. So we could use it in all that different forms. So it's very important that when we make mathematics come to life. So even though we're in the classroom, you have to know that parameter can also be taken out of the classroom. Now, we're living in a time, if I can go back to my table, I'm going back to my table. We're talking about social distancing now. Now, I'm at one end of the table right here. If I were to be outside at the supermarket, I should not be close up with someone. They should be at the other end of the table. And I know in Jamaica sometimes we have that kind of challenges. I don't know if it's because we're accustomed to getting into the minibus and we all so and so and we, like children on the play field and we're playing, we love to huddle together. Or some people even in church, they get into spirit and they're all over the place. The people are into dances or whatever they are in. But it's very important, as research have shown, that social distancing, seems like they're using a mathematical parameter term. Social distancing is very, very important. So we, using my standard measure now to give the gap, using my table. I'm not saying that you should be 2 feet away from the Word of God, so I'm making sure that I move my Bible, so I don't want you to get that. So we're talking at one end. So I'm using so if I'm using, as we have learned today, using standard measure, this is a meter rule. I put 1 meter here, put my measurement here, so you guessed it, I should be at least 2 meters away from another person as I interact. And it's very important that we pay attention to these things. Not that we are being fearful, but we are practicing our mathematics in the real world by making sure that we keep our social distancing. I don't know if when they were going around Jericho City, if social distancing was happening with the army, but I'm sure that they covered all the way around. And we could play even a game in class. We could also play a game in class where one person is here. We could take our tape measure, give somebody a ruler, and they start, and each person can go around using standard measure without disclosing to anyone, and then we can measure to see what they get. And it would reveal, as we did earlier, whether you are a carpenter at work, or a mason, or an engineer, or all the persons who use this special type of tape measure, if they were to measure Jericho City, well, I don't know if the dressmakers or the tailors in Israel's army would have been out there to measure the city. I don't know. But if they were able to use theirs and they would measure, or if they were, they are going to be teachers in the army to teach the soldiers how to march and stuff like that. If we were to use all 3, because they have standard measure of unit, they are going to give us, you got that right, the same measure for Jericho City. If we could also use non-standard just for fun with your friends, I mean, I would say, I don't want to say I have small feet or large feet. I would say I have average feet. Because if I'm with basketball players, then it could be that I have small feet. If I'm around children, it could be seen that I have huge feet. So it varies. So you could go with a small child, or you could go with an adult, and you could measure and see how many steps it would take, and you can have your own little Jericho City if you want, or whatever city, could be Kingston City, whatever you want to have, and you can do your measurement, but you have to make sure that you have no gap. It's very important, as I said, as you do your markings and you do your walk, that you do your measurement. There cannot be any gaps in it, and you could see, you could discover, to say, perhaps in class, if people who might wear the same shoe size, you might never know, but you could practice it that way to ensure. So it's very important that in discovering, as I wrap up with you, that per meter has to do with the total distance going all the way around. Isn't our Bible fun? I never knew that as a child, in learning about Jericho City, that I would be here sharing this mathematical lesson with you. As I said to you, I have a mathematics test for you that is already prepared. You can, you will get the notification where you can go online and you can do that test. It's already pre-prepared. I just took some items from it to give you, that was on the PowerPoint, that would give you insights. We're the one that has to do with the netball court. And as we went around, even our beautiful island of Jamaica, I want you to understand that it doesn't have to be a small space that we can find per meter. We can find per meter of any two-dimensional shape. Now, Jamaica, I'm not in any way saying that Jamaica is two-dimensional. I'm not saying that in any way for those persons who are going to be challenging that. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying the distance of marching around the island. But our two-dimensional shape, I have to make it sure with you, it's on a plane surface. It's right here. It has length and it has width. So I just want to make that clarification so that no one gets the impression that I'm saying that Jamaica is two-dimensional, okay? So that's very, very important. I hope and trust that you would have benefited from our presentation this afternoon. As I said to you, that I'm still wearing my mask before I came into studio, still making sure that, and I'm making sure that I'm going to sanitize. May God bless you all, and I look forward next time as we share together in our online platform, East Jamaica Conference classroom setting. May God bless you. Have a wonderful afternoon.